For decades, China's story was unstoppable growth, an economic rocket ship soaring ever higher. But now, that story is changing. The rocket is sputtering, and its future looks uncertain. Ghost cities and mountains of debt are everywhere. The golden era may be over and no one knows what comes next. Let's talk about debt, because China has a truly spectacular amount of it. Imagine a mountain of debt so high it blocks out the sun. That's basically where China is right now. The country's total debt has ballooned to over 300% of its GDP. That is an astonishing figure, far higher than in most other developing nations. This debt is a toxic cocktail of reckless borrowing by local governments, overextended property developers, and state-owned enterprises that have been kept alive for political reasons, not economic ones. This mountain of debt acts like a giant anchor, dragging down the entire economy and making any attempt at a recovery incredibly difficult. With all this debt, you might expect the government to be throwing money at the problem, but its response has been strangely muted. Instead of giving money directly to its citizens to encourage them to spend, a move that most economists agree is necessary, Beijing has been hesitant. It has tinkered around the edges, cutting interest rates a little and offering more loans to businesses, but it has steadfastly refused to put cash directly into the pockets of its people. This reflects a deep-seated fear within the leadership of empowering consumers and losing control. They would rather build another underused highway than give a family money to buy a new refrigerator. On top of its debt and deflation woes, China is facing another, even more intractable crisis: its own people. Or, more accurately, the lack of them. For the first time in modern history, China's population is shrinking. The one-child policy, brutally enforced for decades, has left the country with a demographic time bomb that is now exploding. The workforce is declining, the number of retirees is soaring, and there are simply not enough young people to support the old. This is not just a social issue, it is a profound economic drag that will weigh on China's growth for generations to come. An aging population is a massive headwind for any economy. Fewer workers mean less production and innovation. A larger elderly population means higher costs for healthcare and pensions, placing an enormous strain on public finances. And crucially, older people tend to save more and spend less, which is the exact opposite of what China's economy needs right now. The government is now desperately trying to encourage people to have more children, but it's too little, too late. Decades of social engineering cannot be reversed overnight, and the demographic decline is now locked in. So, if the economic problems are so obvious, why isn't the Chinese government doing more to fix them? The answer lies in a toxic mix of political fear and entrenched interests. The kind of bold reforms needed to revive the economy, like shifting wealth from the state to households and empowering the private sector, would challenge the very foundations of the Communist Party's power. And for the current leadership, maintaining absolute political control is more important than anything else, including long-term economic prosperity. They are choosing security for the regime over dynamism for the economy. At the heart of the paralysis are powerful vested interests that benefit from the current system. State-owned enterprises, local government officials, and party elites have all grown rich and powerful from the old investment-led model. They have no interest in reforms that would redirect resources to ordinary citizens or create a more level playing field for private businesses. These groups form a powerful block of resistance, quietly sabotaging any attempt at meaningful change. The government is trapped, unable to push through the reforms it needs because the very people tasked with implementing them are the ones who stand to lose the most. When people talk about China's slowdown, they often bring up Japan's lost decades. It's an easy comparison to make. Both countries experienced a massive property bubble that burst, leading to a mountain of bad debt and a long period of economic stagnation. But while there are similarities, the differences are what make China's situation so much more frightening. When Japan's bubble burst in the early 1990s, it was already one of the richest countries in the world. Its GDP per capita was higher than that of the United States. It had the wealth to manage a long, slow decline without a major social crisis. China, on the other hand, is in a much more precarious position. It is facing a Japan-style crisis, but at a South Korea level of income. It is a middle-income country with the problems of a rich one. It doesn't have the deep pockets that Japan had to cushion the blow. Furthermore, Japan was a democracy with strong institutions and a free press that could debate policy solutions openly. China is an opaque, authoritarian state where information is tightly controlled and dissent is crushed. This makes it much harder to identify problems and correct course before it's too late. The most likely outcome of all this is not a sudden spectacular collapse. It's something more insidious, a long, grinding period of stagnation. A hidden crisis that unfolds not with a bang, but with a whimper. China may be heading for its own lost decades, a future where economic growth just flatlines, innovation dries up, and the national mood curdles into one of pessimism and resentment. The dream of overtaking the United States and becoming the world's dominant superpower may simply fade away, not because of a war or a revolution, but because of a series of bad policy choices and a failure to adapt. This future of stagnation would be a profound disappointment for the Chinese people, who have been promised a future of ever-increasing prosperity. For 2 generations, the Communist Party's legitimacy has been built on a simple bargain. We will make you rich, and you will not question our rule. But if the party can no longer deliver on the first part of that deal, the second part becomes much harder to enforce. A long period of economic malaise could lead to rising social unrest and a deep crisis of legitimacy for the regime. The government's obsession with control could ironically lead to the very instability it fears most. Just as China's internal crisis is deepening, its neighborhood is becoming more volatile. Look no further than South Korea, a key U.S. ally and a pillar of regional stability. The country was recently thrown into chaos when its president, Yoon Suk-yeol, suddenly and inexplicably declared martial law. The move was met with immediate and furious opposition from the public and the parliament, forcing the president to back down within hours. But honestly, the damage was done. The bizarre episode revealed deep political fractures within South Korea and sent a shockwave of uncertainty through the entire region. For the United States, this was a nightmare scenario. Washington was completely blindsided by the move. To have a critical ally, home to nearly 30,000 U.S. troops, descend into such political chaos without any warning is a major intelligence failure and a strategic disaster. The U.S.-South Korea alliance is the bedrock of America's security posture in Asia. It is the front line of defense against North Korea and a crucial counterweight to China's growing military power. The turmoil in Seoul casts a dark shadow over the reliability of that alliance at the worst possible moment. Every crisis creates an opportunity for someone. And the twin crises of China's economic slowdown and South Korea's political turmoil are a golden opportunity for their rivals. Nations like North Korea, Russia, and even China itself are watching these events closely, looking for ways to advance their own interests. They see a U.S. alliance network that is suddenly looking shaky and a regional order that is in flux. For them, this is a moment to test boundaries, sow discord, and chip away at American influence in Asia. North Korea is perhaps the most immediate beneficiary. With South Korea distracted by its internal political drama, Pyongyang may feel emboldened to engage in new provocations. It could conduct another missile test or a border incursion, calculating that a divided and preoccupied government in Seoul will be less able to mount a strong, unified response. The crisis in the South gives Kim Jong-un a perfect opening to create a crisis of his own, to test the resolve of the U.S.-South Korea alliance, and to extract concessions from a position of strength. When we connect the dots, a deeply unsettling picture emerges. China's hidden crisis of economic stagnation and the flaring political turmoil in key allied nations like South Korea are not separate stories. They are 2 sides of the same coin. The end of the post-Cold War era of stability and the beginning of a new, far more uncertain and dangerous period in Asia. The old assumptions about China's inevitable rise and the unwavering strength of U.S. alliances are being shattered. We are entering an unsettled century, and the consequences will be felt across the globe. China's economic malaise means it may never achieve the superpower status that so many predicted. But a stagnating China is not necessarily a peaceful one. History teaches us that declining powers can often be the most dangerous, lashing out to distract from domestic problems or to reclaim a sense of national glory. A weaker, more insecure China, facing a legitimacy crisis at home, could become more nationalistic and aggressive, particularly on issues like Taiwan. The world may have to worry less about a rich, confident China, and more about a poor, angry one.